The desert around Fort Resolute shimmered in the dry heat. The air rippled over the sand-colored range, turning the ground into a wavering mirage. A line of soldiers stood along the observation deck, their uniforms streaked with dust and sweat, eyes shaded beneath the brims of their patrol caps. They spoke quietly among themselves, voices carrying disbelief. A logistics officer was about to attempt the Falcon qualification scenario, a test that had defeated trained Tier 1 snipers for weeks. Commander Marcus Holt stood at the front, clipboard tucked under one arm, his expression unreadable but skeptical. The heat pressed against him like armor as he watched the lone figure step onto the range. First Lieutenant Sarah Ward moved with a kind of quiet precision, her steps measured, her posture unshaken by the murmurs trailing her. Her hands, steady and deliberate, unpacked a MiG-13 Mod 7 precision rifle, the kind issued to elite Marine Scout snipers. She laid out her tools neatly on the bench, every movement efficient. Around here, the wind howled, kicking grit into the air, sharp against the skin. The Falcon scenario was brutal in its simplicity. 3 moving targets at unpredictable ranges. 8 seconds to engage and hit them all. Even the best missed under wind like this. A few soldiers whispered that she would never clear it. One of them muttered something about logistics officers belonging behind supply crates. Not on sniper ranges? Holt heard it, but said nothing. He had seen arrogance break people before. But something about her calm unsettled him. She didn't look arrogant. She looked ready. At 1400 hours, the range officer gave the signal. The valley fell silent, except for the hiss of the wind. Sarah adjusted her scope, reading the mirage through her optics, feeling rather than measuring. The first steel silhouette jerked into motion. A sharp crack cut the air, echoing off the ridges. Another target slid across the far ridge. Then a third. 3 cracks followed, clean and controlled. Each one separated by less than 3 seconds. The sound of the last casing hitting the sand was the only noise that followed. When the green sensors blinked on the monitor, Holt lowered his binoculars slowly. 3 perfect hits. 6.7 seconds. The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't speak at all. A heavy silence settled over the range, the kind that happens when something impossible becomes real. Sarah lowered her rifle, cleared the chamber, and stepped back from the line. The wind still moved, but now it seemed softer, as if even the desert had paused to listen. The desert was still when the first light reached Fort Resolute. The air carried a chill that cut through the dust, and the horizon glowed with a slow orange burn. It was 7:15 a.m. when First Lieutenant Sarah Ward stepped out of her vehicle, rifle case balanced on one shoulder, wind meter and ballistic computer in hand. Her boots sank slightly into the sand as she walked toward the range. The world around her was quiet except for the hum of a distant generator. Every sound, even her steps, seemed to echo louder in the morning cold. Inside the command tent, Commander Marcus Holt sat behind a folding table with a clipboard and a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. He flipped through Sarah's record, scanning her name, her branch, her assignments. Logistics officer. No sniper school. No advanced marksmanship certification. He frowned at the details, convinced this was some kind of misunderstanding. When she entered, he looked up, expecting nervousness. Instead, she stood straight, eyes steady, uniform clean but marked with desert dust. He asked what she hoped to prove, and her answer came without hesitation. She said she only wanted to know how good she really was. Holt studied her for a long moment. There was no arrogance in her tone, no uncertainty either. He had seen confidence before, but this was different. It was quiet and exact, the kind that didn't seek approval. Sarah placed her rifle case on the table and unlatched it carefully. Inside, next to the polished MiG-13, Mod 7, lay a small laminated photo. A man in marine fatigues stood smiling under a desert sky. his name tag reading Ward, Master Sergeant David Ward, Marine Scout Sniper Instructor, Camp Pendleton. For a moment, her hand rested on the edge of the case, the memory of his voice flickering through her thoughts. Patience beats speed. Calm beats talent. Always. The words had guided her since the day he never came back from Helmand Province. She closed the lid, her motion precise, controlled. When she stepped back outside, the cold air met her again, heavy and judging. The targets were waiting, glinting faintly in the light. She looked toward them, breathing slow and even, already choosing silence over doubt. By 700 hours, the desert sun had already burned through the thin layer of morning haze. Heat shimmered across the ridges that bordered the range, and the faint metallic scent of gun oil hung in the air. A row of generals and range officers watched from the observation platform, their binoculars trained on the single figure at the firing line. First Lieutenant Sarah Ward stepped forward, her boots crunching over the grit, the weight of her Man 13 Mod 7 balanced across her forearms. She looked out at the stretch of sand and metal ahead, where 3 steel silhouettes waited in silence. The Falcon qualification was no ordinary test. It was a Tier 1 evaluation used for the best shooters in special operations. 3 moving targets at variable ranges. Less than 8 seconds to clear them all. No warm-up shots. No second chances. Commander Marcus Holt stood with his arms crossed, stopwatch in hand, the sun glinting off his sunglasses. He had seen seasoned snipers buckle under less pressure. A logistics officer had no business standing there. But here she was, adjusting her scope like she'd done it 1,000 times. Sarah checked her Kestrel wind meter. 9 miles per hour from the right, she adjusted her windage knob 2 clicks left. Elevation up, 1/4 mil. Her breathing slowed until the world narrowed to the rhythm of her pulse. The command tower crackled over the loudspeaker. Falcon scenario start in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Begin. The first target broke into motion, gliding left to right at 750 meters. Sarah tracked its movement through the scope, the reticle floating steady over center mass. Her breath paused mid-exhale. The rifle cracked. A puff of dust jumped from the target's chest plate. Before the echo faded, she cycled the bolt. The second silhouette darted diagonally at 320 meters. She shifted, compensating for drift, aiming 2 inches off-center. Another clean crack. The metal jerked. A hit through the lung zone. The third target appeared high on the ridge, 800 meters. Moving uphill, wind picked up just as the sun flashed against her scope. She adjusted for the glare, dialed elevation down 0.2 mils, and let the crosshairs settle. One last breath. Steady. Crack. The sound echoed back across the valley. Then silence. The green sensors blinked on the range monitor. 3 hits. 6.7 seconds. The murmurs died instantly. Holt lowered his binoculars, his mouth half open, but no words coming. The generals leaned forward, rechecking the screen as if it might be a mistake. Someone near the back asked who trained her. Sarah's voice carried, calm and steady. Her father, Master Sergeant David Ward. The name landed like a slow realization, spreading through the line. Holt knew it. Everyone did. The man whose record had stood for over a decade, now broken by his daughter. He looked at Sarah again, this time without skepticism. She cleared her rifle, safety on, and stepped back from the firing line. The wind gusted softly, moving dust through the air, and for a long moment, no one spoke. The silence itself felt heavy, like the desert was holding its breath. Aware that it had just witnessed something it would never forget. The command tent at Fort Resolute was quiet, except for the faint hum of a generator outside. Dust drifted through the light, slanting in from the open flap, catching in the air between the officers who stood frozen in disbelief. General Adrian Keller sat behind the field table, Sarah Ward's file open in front of him. A faint crease on his brow as he scanned each line. Logistics officer. No sniper school. No advanced marksmanship credentials. Across the tent, Commander Marcus Holt remained standing, still processing what he had seen on the range. Sarah stood at attention, her posture exact, face calm under the harsh light. Keller's voice was even but heavy with curiosity as he asked how she managed such precision without formal training. She answered quietly, explaining that her father had taught her how to feel the wind rather than depend entirely on the instruments. He believed patience and control were stronger than speed. Keller studied her expression, searching for pride, but found only sincerity. She spoke like someone who had already learned the cost of discipline. The tent held a long silence before Keller leaned back in his chair. His voice softened, but the authority in it carried weight, effective immediately. He said, she would be reassigned to Special Operations Unit 9 for combat evaluation. Holt blinked at the words, caught off guard. A logistics officer moving straight into a Tier 1 operational environment was almost unheard of. He looked between the two of them, shaking his head slightly, as if trying to make sense of it. When Keller dismissed her, Holt finally let out a breath and gave a faint, almost reluctant smile. He told her she had just been thrown into the deep end. Sarah returned a small nod, eyes steady, her tone calm as she accepted the order. As she stepped out into the sunlight, the wind caught the edge of her uniform. The range stretched in the distance, the place where everything had changed, and she understood that what came next would demand more than precision. It would demand proof. The sun was slipping behind the ridgeline when the Humvee rolled through the gates of Special Operations Unit 9. The compound sat half-buried in desert sand. A cluster of low concrete hangars and hardened shelters streaked with dust. The air smelled faintly of oil and cordite. Operators moved with quiet precision between vehicles, their gear clean but worn, their steps purposeful. It wasn't a place for mistakes or noise. Sarah Ward stepped out of the vehicle, adjusted the strap on her rifle case, and took in the scene with a steady gaze. Lieutenant Commander Cole Mercer waited near the main hangar, tall and composed. The kind of man who measured everything before he spoke. His expression was unreadable as he looked her over. He knew who she was. Everyone did by now. The logistics officer who had broken the Falcon record. He introduced himself in the clipped rhythm of someone used to command and told her she'd be the team's Overwatch specialist during the evaluation cycle. It wasn't a welcome. It was a test. Chief Petty Officer Ethan Rohr, the team's point man, watched from a few feet away, arms folded, unimpressed. Petty Officers Diaz and McConnell, both younger and more approachable, gave her small nods. The atmosphere was professional but cold. Sarah answered every order with a crisp acknowledgement. No emotion in her tone. No defensiveness in her stance. Mercer briefed her on the upcoming drills and dismissed her with a reminder. In this unit, performance is the only introduction that matters. Training began before dawn the next morning. At 500 hours, the field lights cut through the desert fog as the team ran through breach drills and close-quarters movement. Sarah crawled through mud beside men who outweighed her by 50 pounds, never asking for leniency, never slowing down. When others cursed the heat, she checked the wind direction. When they joked between runs, she sat apart, logging range data in a small notebook and cleaning her Mach 13 Mod 7 with mechanical precision. By the end of the third day, even Rohr had stopped commenting. She didn't try to outshoot anyone. She simply performed. During stress fire drills, her shots landed exactly where they needed to. Every time. Mercer began to notice it too. She never celebrated, never sought approval. She just worked. The team started watching her differently. Respect, the quiet kind, began to replace doubt. When the sun fell and the desert cooled, Sarah stayed on the range, tracking invisible air currents through her scope until the last light disappeared. In Unit 9, That kind of focus didn't go unnoticed. The fog was thick enough to swallow sound. It rolled across the mock urban training site, softening the edges of walls and turning every shadow into a threat. The team from Unit 9 moved in silence, weapons low, breathing steady through comms. Then the first crack of simulated gunfire broke the quiet, and chaos followed. Chief Petty Officer Ethan Rohr's voice cut through static, tense and clipped. Visibility dropped to nothing. Targets moved unseen between the broken buildings. From her overwatch perch, Lieutenant Sarah Ward lay prone behind her MOG 13 Mod 7. The rifle's night vision attachment glowing faint green through the haze. The world in her scope shifted in shades of black and gray. Every movement, a whisper in the fog. She scanned the patterns of heat distortion and light scatter, catching what others couldn't. Her voice came through calm and exact. Window left. 2 figures. Upper level. Rohr adjusted his aim and fired. The targets dropped. More confusion rippled through the comms. As the team hit another blind corner, Sarah's voice again. Clear but quiet. Alley east. 3 moving. Wait for my mark. Her breathing slowed. One target crossed into view. She squeezed the trigger. And the first hit fell. Her correction guided the next 2 shots. Perfect timing that pulled the team out of a simulated ambush. When Rohr ducked behind a wall, a stray round sliced through the fog inches from his shoulder. Sarah saw the flicker first, called the direction, and her shot found the source before he even looked up. The radio went still except for McConnell's voice, soft with disbelief. She seized between heartbeats. The words stuck. By the next day, the name Ghost Eye followed her through the compound. Quiet at first. Passed between operators who didn't joke anymore. It wasn't mockery. It was recognition. Rohr, the loudest skeptic of all, gave her a small nod the next time they crossed paths. It said more than words. Late that night, after the field lights went dark, Sarah sat alone on the range. Wiping the fog residue from her scope, the desert was still except for the distant hum of wind through fencing. She worked in silence. Calm. Précise. Unaware that the team no longer saw her as the outsider. Ghost Eye had earned her place. The desert at night was cold and alive with noise. The moonlight spilled across the dunes in thin silver lines as 2 UH-60 Blackhawks swept low over the ridge. Their rotors carved the air into a steady rhythm that rolled through the valley like thunder. Sand lifted in sheets as the first helicopter flared over the drop zone. The assault team from Unit 9 jumped fast, moving in a low crouch, weapons ready. Their night vision goggles flashing pale green. Lieutenant Commander Cole Mercer's voice came through the radio. Calm and clipped. Unit 9. Execute Phase 1. Half a mile north. Lieutenant Sarah Ward crawled through the sand. Her rifle cradled against her chest. She moved low, using the terrain to mask her silhouette. Her MOG 13 Mod 7 was fitted with thermal optics and a suppressor, the matte finish blending with the rock. Every few feet, she paused to check the wind through her scope, reading the subtle waves in the air like ripples on water. Her heart rate stayed steady. Her breathing, even from her position on the ridge. The compound below was a maze of broken walls and floodlights. She counted 6 hostiles, 2 civilians, multiple unknowns. Mercer's voice broke through the static again. Ghost Eye. Confirm overwatch position. Sarah whispered her reply. Set and ready. The team moved in, their infrared markers pulsing faintly through her scope. She tracked their progress, scanning corners, rooftops, and alleyways. The first breach charge lit the night in a quick burst of orange. Her crosshairs found 2 armed figures rushing toward the balcony. She adjusted for a 5-mile wind from the west and fired. One dropped instantly. Then the other. The operation flowed like clockwork until the northern ridge flashed on her thermal display. 6 new heat signatures were advancing, cutting across her line of sight. They weren't part of the scenario. Sarah reported contact. but command ordered her to fall back. She hesitated. If she moved, the team would be exposed. Negative, she said softly. I still have line of sight. She adjusted her scope again and took the first shot. Crack. One target down. Crack. Another. She shifted right. Found the third through drifting dust. And squeezed. 3 seconds. 3 hits. Rounds snapped against the rocks near her position. Dirt exploded around her hands. She rolled behind a boulder, reloaded, and started a sniper's retreat. Short movements. Low crawl. Muzzle angled downrange. She fired twice more, taking out 2 pursuing targets. Her comms filled with static and breath. Mercer's voice came through, sharp and steady. Ghost Eye. Fall back now. She answered between breaths, moving to secondary. The valley glowed faintly from the muzzle flashes below. She crawled another 50 yards, her elbows raw from stone and grit. When she reached the ravine, she turned one last time. Scanning for movement, the compound was clear. The team was pulling out. She rose into a crouch and ran for extraction, rifle tight across her chest. By the time she reached the landing zone, the Black Hawks were already spooling up. Rotor wash, whipping her hair against her face. Mercer met her at the ramp, eyes narrowing. That was either the bravest or dumbest thing I've seen in 15 years. Sarah wiped the dust from her cheek, her voice calm. The team was still in the open. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. And now they're not. The helicopter lifted off, climbing into the dark. Below them, the desert glowed faintly under the moonlight. The ridge she had defended fading into shadow. No one spoke. The only sound was the thrum of the rotors and the quiet understanding that Ghost Eye had just proven she was one of them. The debrief room smelled of dust, sweat, and gun oil. The air was heavy, the kind of quiet that only came after combat. Folding tables filled the space, maps and tablets spread across them, while the men of Unit 9 sat still in their chairs, uniforms streaked with dirt and exhaustion. A projector flickered against the far wall, replaying the mission footage frame by frame. Ace shot. Each call-out, each correction from Ghost Eye appeared in sharp clarity. No one spoke as the green-tinted video rolled on, showing exactly how close they had come to losing half the team. The door opened without announcement. General Adrian Keller stepped inside, his presence enough to still even the smallest movement. He didn't look at the screen. He looked at the people. Commander Cole Mercer rose first. Posture straight. Voice, even as he delivered the report, 9 confirmed hostile neutralized. 0 friendly casualties. Full extraction under fire. Keller nodded once. Expression unreadable. And asked for input. The room stayed silent until Chief Ethan Rohr leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. He said that she hadn't disobeyed orders. She had ignored fear. There was a difference. Petty Officer Dyes spoke next. His tone quieter but certain. Best Overwatch he'd seen in 12 years. Keller's gaze turned to Sarah Ward, who sat straight-backed near the corner of the table. The faint glow from the projector caught her face, calm and controlled, eyes steady but tired. Keller studied her for a long moment before finally speaking. She had proven Tier 1 readiness. He said, effective immediately. She was appointed Sniper Commander of Unit 9. The words landed like a weight across the room. No applause followed. No noise at all. Mercer's jaw tightened as he looked her way. Welcome to the top. Ghost Eye, you earned it. Sarah nodded once in acknowledgement, her expression unchanged, but her shoulders firm. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was respect. Everyone in that room knew they had just witnessed something that would be remembered long after the dust of that night had settled. The debrief room emptied slowly. The sound of boots fading down the concrete hall, the faint hum of generators filled the space that victory had left behind. Paperwork. Empty coffee cups. and the lingering scent of oil and sweat marked the end of a long night. Sarah Ward gathered her notes. Her movements quiet, deliberate, her mind already settling back into calm. Outside, the air carried the cold breath of the desert, still humming with distant machinery. Commander Marcus Holt waited near the doorway, his posture no longer rigid. He looked older than before, the fatigue settling in behind his eyes. When she approached, he spoke with a tone she hadn't heard from him until now. He told her that her father would have been proud, that composure under fire wasn't something you could teach, it was something you were built for. She nodded once, her expression soft but steady. She said her father used to tell her that silence under pressure separates skill from noise. Holt smiled faintly at that, then returned her salute with quiet respect. Sarah walked alone down the corridor, the dim lights humming above her. The doors to the hangar were half open, letting the night air drift through. Beyond them stretched the desert valley, endless and still. The same place where she had turned disbelief into history. The stars were sharp against the black sky, and the wind moved gently through the sand. She stood there for a moment, looking toward the distant ridge where it had all begun. Her breath came slow and even, the same rhythm she had carried through every shot, every test. She whispered softly, almost to herself, still quiet. Dad. The sound vanished into the night, carried away by the wind. The desert stayed silent, but in that silence, she felt an answer. It was calm, steady, and endless like the discipline she had lived by, and the peace she had finally earned. In the end, Sarah Ward's story wasn't about glory or fame. It was about quiet excellence, the kind that doesn't demand attention but earns respect through action. She proved that real strength doesn't shout, that calm under pressure can move mountains where noise cannot. Every soldier knows that discipline and composure are harder to master than any weapon. And she lived that truth, one breath at a time. Her journey reminds us that courage isn't always loud, and victory doesn't always come with applause. It lives in the silence between heartbeats, in the moments when skill replaces fear, and purpose outweighs pride. That is what defines true mastery. If you believe that kind of strength deserves to be honored, join us. Subscribe to Military and Veteran Stories, where real courage speaks quietly. And to Ghost Eye Respect, you didn't just pass the test, you redefined it.